In this tutorial, you will learn to build an epic React Native real-time chat application including Expo router, a lot of Typescript, file upload, and how to use the Convex backend. Hey everyone, what's up? This is Simon from Galaxies.dev, and in today's video you will build a real-time React Native chat application and we will connect it to a Convex backend. So Convex is the sponsor of today's video, and Convex is a new type of backend platform which includes a lot of TypeScript. So we don't really touch SQL, but we're writing a lot of TypeScript, and we're gonna have type safety across our whole application, from tables to cloud functions to how we access the data to file upload and everything included. In our React Native application, we will then focus on using the latest packages, which means Expo 49. We're gonna use Expo file-based routing with Expo router. We're gonna write our own cool styling for that chat and integrate functionality to have chat groups, to add chats, and to display the actual chat view with automatic scrolling, and in the end even cover how we can select images, bring them into the chat with the right styling, and of course how we can make all of that work with Convex. Before we dive into the build, make sure you check out convex.dev. Again, thanks for sponsoring this video. I highly enjoyed working with Convex and you should certainly check it out. And of course, all code that we use in this video will be linked right below in the description. And now without further ado, let's build an epic React Native chat application. Alright, so let's get started by creating a new React Native application, and then we're gonna go through the integration of Convex in that app. So start one with create Expo app. I'm going to call this Convex chat, and I'm using the tabs template. Then we're gonna install the Convex package. This is probably the most important part here, as we really need to use this locally a lot in our application. Not just because of the client SDK, but also to write our functions and all the other fun. So go ahead with that, and then add two more packages. I want to use the async storage package to track some data in the application, and I will later also display a little dialog. So these are just some two additional optional packages. Then you can run npx expo as always to bring out the preview, and I run I to open up the iOS simulator, as you can see here. Now, I really want to simplify this a bit, but before we do that, let's also check out the TS config, because in here we can also use the experimental path. So let's add a path object in here, which is then for add and everything below it. We're going to use the alias. So that is just something that's usually included with one of the Expo templates, but we're gonna add this. And then we're gonna go to the app.json file, in which we can set under experiments the tsconfig path to true. So that will just make it a bit easier to work with some of the files in our application and not have these ugly links in all the different places. So before we get into the app, maybe let's talk about Convex and how we can use it. So as we've installed Convex, we can now run npx convex dev. This will run our local dashboard, and it will also ask us some questions. So what would you like to configure? I want to definitely configure a new project. So I'm going to call this Convex chat video. So it's creating a new project, and then we can manage it. I'm going to open Convex now. So here's the starting page, and if you log in, you should probably sign in with GitHub, and then you should be on your dashboard after some time. And the interesting thing is that here I found the first problem. Like when I got here, it was empty, and I clicked create project, and I was like, I want to create my project here. And I was like, I don't know, how can I create a project? Because that is the usual way, like in backends, you have this function and it brings you to a nice UI. But with Convex, things are different. I'm going to tell this probably a few more times throughout this tutorial. Things are different. This doesn't mean they're bad. Actually, I think they're better. So as we can see, we have now created our first Convex chat. It should appear right here, and this simply came from running the CLI, and you probably have to do the GitHub CLI with the GitHub login with the CLI as well, and this was the one I used before. There are also already two environments, so we got production and development right out of the gate, which is pretty cool. So let's go in here. Actually, ooh, this is prod. I don't want to have this. I want to go development. And we already see we got functions. I don't have functions. We have data. I don't really have data, and files and all the things. And we're gonna now fill this with some live. However, to achieve that, what we need is to set up our environment. So here's already .env.local. Actually, I think this was created by Convex. I didn't do this. This is magic. Why you do this? But I like magic. I sometimes really like magic. So it gives us the Convex deployment of Industrious Bohr 503. I really like these names. And a Convex URL that looks like this. Now, right in the beginning, we're gonna do two little changes here. So I'm first of all going to call this one Expo public. That will allow us to use this in our Expo application. And then I'm also adding a second one, which I will call Expo Convex site. And this one's going to be just convex.site at the end, probably lowercase. Let's see. Am I on lowercase? Yes. Because we're gonna have a little problem with file upload later if we don't do this. But for the beginning, we just need those two. And you can check here that I'm definitely the Industrious Bohr 503 in my project. Great. So with that in place, I also highly recommend that you restart your npx expo command. Otherwise, it won't pick up the new environment. So now it should show that it's loading the env file, and you don't have to use a .env. It can really be .env local, could be .env prod. So follow this up with I or Android, whatever you prefer, and then I don't want to select a simulator. Just run on whatever you ran. That's new. I don't know how I got here. Okay. Also, what's new in our project is that we have a Convex folder now. So Convex created this folder, and while the CLI is still running, we should be able to go to our project. So manage it at dashboard convex dev Simon convex chat video. So if I would open up this, it would just bring me back here where we've been before. We have that folder, and how Convex works is that we now write everything with Typescript in this folder, and it will be applied to our backend. So that makes it really different and unique, and I just really like that. So let me show you what's cool. I created this little file here. I called this chat groups JSON-L. JSON-L is just an addition, so we can use new lines in here and a bit different setup. So we got two lines in here. So first one, Convex dev chat, a description, and an icon URL, and the same for the second one. So the idea is to just create two dummy chat groups for the chat that we want to do. Now I can run my CLI again, and I'm going ahead with npx. Oh, I was putting me always on uppercase. npx convex. Does it give me some code completion? Not really. So I want to import into a table that I want to call groups, the chat groups JSON-L file. Let's hit enter. And let's wait, importing, edit to documents. So let's see. I'm going to refresh this. I'm going into development mode, and voila, our two documents appear in that table. This is pretty cool, as we can see a bunch of things now. We can play around with these. We can also go to the schema, which indicates that Convex is creating all of this for us on the fly, which is really, really cool, and we don't really have to do a lot. So under the hood, this is a database that you can use like a NoSQL database, but it also gives you the relations of a SQL database. That's pretty cool and impressive. And this is like the core of your Convex application. They call it the reactor. So there's like the tables, and now the queries and the mutation functions is what we're going to talk about next to actually extract data from that reactor. So we got the dummy data, and what I want to do is I actually want to use that schema. So let me go back to my schema, and I'm just going to copy this and go back to my file. We don't really need this anymore, and we don't really need the dummy data anymore. I just want to do a new file, schema.ts, here in the Convex folder, and I'm going to put in my schema. Now, module convex has no export. I kinda not agree, but at the same time, I think the import is not correct. I think it should be from server, shouldn't it? Yeah, and that brings it up. So that makes, I don't know why that import was wrong. That's strange. Probably, let's see, did I do anything wrong here? Generated instruction pasted into your convex and modify the file if you generated. That's really strange. That it's using this, because usually what I would do is I would now import v from convex values exactly for validation from convex values, not validation, but it's used for validation, and I would replace this as our schema. I don't know why it took this additional step. So you can, in theory, not touch any SQL and set up your database. And that's the cool thing about Convex. Again, it's TypeScript all the way. So we have our schema here in TypeScript, and we can now query that data with just TypeScript. How do we query the data? Is there an API endpoint? How can I just connect to the database? Well, let's just write our own functions to read that data. That's very refreshing, right? It's somewhat different. So we're going ahead with the groups.ts file. And in that groups file, I'm going to export some functions like a get function here to query the database. And you see, the funny thing is this imports from generated servers. So TypeScript is Convex is generating some data models here in the background for us that we can then use, and again, TypeScript all the time. So what I want to do is I want to query, and I want to put an object in here. I don't have any arguments for this. This is just a get request. So we want to get all the groups of a chat. We're going to later see how we can filter that. And what I need in here is now a handler for that. So we do have one context available to us, and from that context we can do great things. This is now the setup for our function, which directly talks to the database, and you're going to see why directly in TypeScript, why I'm emphasizing this here. So we return await. This is of course an asynchronous operation, but from the context we should now be able to access the database, and then we can call the query function. And while this looks interesting, I don't want to write SQL. So the only thing the query function needs is a table name. In my case, this is going to be fun. Let's see what it gives if I say fun. It will say argument type of fun is not assignable to groups. Because that's the only thing our database has. So I'm going to change this to groups, and everyone's happy. That feels so better without the red lines, right? And we're going to wrap this up with a call to collect, which will just return all the data. Again, we can do the filtering later. For now, we're just going to stick to this. So this is how you connect to your database. You write your own functions in JavaScript or TypeScript, which run in the cloud on the Convex backend. And the interesting thing is that by writing it here and running my npx convex function, it will automatically update this. You see this? Convex functions ready. It's automatically deploying our function. This is so much fun. So let's go back to our dashboard and let's see if I filter, no. Functions, of course, it's under functions. And we see new functions, groups, get. I'm going to select that, and we see the code because it's deployed, and I can also run this. That's quite cool to just test the stuff. So if I run this is my query output. So I'm getting the description, the icon URL, and the name just as expected. So from importing the data, running the local npx convex command, and writing the function to actually read the data from our database using TypeScript all the time, and to getting the results of that function, it's just an interesting concept. And I found this so refreshing because I've worked with other backends before, and it's cool, they're great as well. But this is certainly something I haven't seen like this before, and it's really refreshing. So with that function in place, let's now also focus on our React Native application, because we're full stack developers, right? We can do all the things all the time. And what I want to do definitely is I want to get rid of a bunch of things. So I'm going to remove pretty much everything besides the layout. I'm also going to, do we want to keep that? No, we're also like removing the components and the constants. I just want the bare stuff of that application. And I'm going to put in a new index file because that's the first file you're going to use with the Expo router. We're going to just call this page, doesn't really matter too much. Okay, and then let's head back to the layout. So Expo puts a lot of interesting things in here that I really don't want to burden you with. So I'm going to remove most of it. And we have our export default function root layout. That's what I'm going to use. And we're going to use a stack. That's true. But for the stack, what I want is we don't really have a modal, we don't really have a tabs page at all. I mean, we don't need to supply anything in here if we don't want to. Actually, we can like remove pretty much everything. So I really like to simplify, go back to the roots, and then build out the application from there, as still one of the main tasks and challenges of this video is to build a React Native chat application, and Convex is just our backend for that purpose. But to use Convex in our React Native application, we now have to wrap the provider around our application. So I'm going to create a new Convex object here and say new Convex React client. And it would be cool if I get an auto import for that, but we can't have everything today. So this comes from the Convex React package. Now inside, what we need, of course, is the address. So this comes now from process.env, and then we have to be careful. I think it was Expo public. Yeah, Expo Copilot. I don't know why you're not able to figure this out. Like I literally wrote this a few seconds ago. So using the Expo public, this might be undefined, yeah, but it isn't. It isn't. It certainly isn't. And that would probably be enough, but they also recommend in the Getting Started guide that we have unsaved changes warning changed to false as a React Native fix. Great. Now we are wrapping this around my application, so I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to say Convex provider, and I supply our Convex object around this and close it. What are you mad about right here? Type is not a silent type, blah, blah, blah. Convex is not, property convex does not exist on type anything yet, because this is wrong. It has to be client. Thank you very much. And let's see. Let's reload our application and boom, we're back in the game. So how can we now query the data from our groups page, and how can we add data? Well, that's the interesting thing. But I'm going to start with the most basic example of querying the data that always gives me this feeling of, oh yes, I'm actually in control and I can do this. So how can we do this? Well, we are going to grab the data. I'm gonna say const groups equals use query, not queries, use query. And I want to use the query that we defined, which is to be found under API. And again, check, this is the generated folder. API.groups.get. And again, we get code completion. So I could change this, or I could click and I'm immediately there. And this is what we're going to put in here. And we're going to have, if we use queries, automatic real-time connection to Convex. And we don't really need to care about anything besides that. Let's try and let's just do the most basic things. So I'm going to say style flex1, and I'm going to wrap everything inside a scroll view from React Native. Yeah, something like this. But I'm going to groups.map. So for every group, I'm creating this. This is possibly undefined. Okay, let's say as a fallback, it would be an empty array. Okay, that should probably solve that issue. And then we just gonna say, okay, view, and is it group name? What was the thingy here? Yeah, we have code completion, right? Yeah, we have code completion for our table. So could be something of this. We have the name, description, and icon URL. Also, that should be group underscore ID. Underscore ID and creation time are automatically provided by Convex. Let's hit save, and yes, we got it. We got it. we got some data. Let's try to add a test in here. Actually, let's see. I'm going to just copy the convex chat element, the dummy thing I had before. So name, let's just call this test, and I'm going to keep the rest in here. I'm going to hit save, and it appears. Because again, real time, everything real time, all the time, real time by default. Okay, I'm also going to delete this, not to show you that I can delete it, but I don't want to mess this up, and voila. Cool, so we got a nice starting point. I think we've covered the basic stuff of integrating Convex, the first steps of creating our own query. Let's also now extend this query before we then get back to our React Native application. So if we talk about querying the groups collection, we probably also need another query to get one specific group. So let's call this one get group. Now this time the query needs to change a bit, as we need to pass in an ID by which we can filter. We can supply or define that ID here and say this is an ID of our groups table. Okay, so can I find V? Didn't we have the validator? Oh yeah, we added it in the schema file, right. So here we go. Now we got this. Now, besides the context, I can now also directly destructure and grab the ID. So I got that information in here. And what I want to do now is I want to return await context db query groups. That's right. But I don't want to collect. I want to filter. And I want to filter every element. We're going to call this Q, and we're going to say Q equals, so that is our check, and we want to check the field ID. So again, if I would do anything wrong in here, Typescript would certainly correct me. And let's turn off Copilot. It's disable globally, so it's just confusing right now. So q.field ID and compare this to my ID. As I said, if I change anything, I would get an error here because this just knows the different fields of our table. And this should get me just one group, so I can attach unique. That should just return one unique element because in theory and practice, there can only be one element. So this is a call to get one group, but it's just a query and we just need to pass a parameter to it. So it's not going to be very complicated. How can we also add data? That's add data, there was a D inside. That's where we write mutation. So let's say I will also create groups at some point. In that case, I'm using a mutation. And in that mutation, I will once again have an arguments object. And that argument object, of course, needs a description for that group. So description, oh no, we will do this correctly. So the description uses the validator, and then we got the different types this could have. So I'm going with string in here. Then we have a name. It's also going to be a string. And then we're going to have an icon URL, which is also going to be a string. Cool. Additionally, we need the handler again, and the handler will have access to the database and also to the arguments. So we're doing it a bit different. Before we just structured the arguments into getting the ID. Now we're just using the full arguments object. And instead of using the context, I'm just structuring and grabbing directly the DB from the arguments. So this is nothing really different itself, just a bit more TypeScript. And to make sure that you understand, like if you look at the Convex documentation later, that you see the different things that you might encounter. So from the database, I want to call insert because I want to insert data with my mutation. I want to insert into which table? Yes, the groups table. And I want to insert my arguments. Now, if I would change these in the arguments, again, it would complain because it knows the structure and the schema of that table and the fields this table has. Also, if I would say this is a Boolean, it will complain because description can't be a Boolean if I want to insert it. So it gives you really a lot of safety and security in your application. Cool. With this in place, Let's head back to my index and my layout. So for the layout, I also want to change my styling a tiny bit. This is not super important, but still I want to give this chat application a nice little touch. So I'm defining some screen options here for my overall stack, which will be applied to all the pages. Additionally, on my stack page for the index, I will use it like this. So add all, where's add all missing imports? So I want to show the header title, my chats. The link component is from Expo router, that's correct. I'm going to use it like this. And Ionicons comes from the Expo vector icons package. Thank you for nothing, Visual Studio Code today. So this is the definition for my first screen. As we've seen, with Expo router, it shows automatically, but you can also define it for the specific name, which is the name of your file. So this here should be this. So if I had like a simon.tsx, name would be Simon. And then under options, I could supply different options for the actual title of that page. Additionally, I added a header right icon up here, which is a plus sign, which should eventually bring us to a little modal. And because the Expo router knows about Typescript and just like Convex generates the stuff on the fly, it knows that we haven't created that file. So let me create that file right here. I'm gonna put this in the folder modal. That's not really required, but I feel like in terms of structuring the application, it's still a good idea. I'm just going to call this one page. And under layout, I will now say, okay, in that case, please go to modal/create, and we already see that we get that route. With that in place, we can also define that route while we're here. So the modal create route, again, this is the path. This is the path. That comes somewhere else from. But anyway, this is the path. Actually, I can like, wasn't there like a something? Yeah, the quick arrow, right? Yeah, that's the quick arrow. So this is the name of that page, but I didn't want to show that. This one has start a chat presentation modal, which makes it, hopefully, if I hit save, not appear like we've seen right before, but appear like this, like a card on top. And again, up here, we have a button to close this, which just brings us back. We could also have a function to use the router to go back. It doesn't really matter too much at this point. I just noticed that while we're here, let's complete our routing setup. So I want to also have another route under chat. Again, not required, but it's nice to just group our stuff. And then use a parameter in here. I'll use chatid.tsx. And with them, I'm going to put a functional page. Okay. So that means we can open chat/some ID, and we will be able on this page to like grab the ID using something like use local search params from the Expo router. I think we actually need to just structure it to get the ID. And then we should be hopefully able to print out that ID. And with that in place, we can finish up our routing information by adding one more thing for chat/ID. And set the title to something like test. It doesn't really matter too much at this point, just so we have all the routes for our application set up. And with that, we can now create our index page, right? So we already get the groups, which is cool. That's a good news. Now we just want to present them in an acceptable way. Therefore, I'm also adding some styles down here. So let's create a style sheet using just React Native style sheet.create. And then I'm going to start with a little container styling, which we'll use flex1. And I'm going to add that to the scroll view styling. So styles.container. Okay, won't really change a whole lot, but probably want to add a bit of padding in here to make that stick out. And I want to change the background color to a nice little, yeah, yellowish, convexish gray. That's what I would call it. By the way, while we're here, I just noticed that we should also see, yeah, we have now all the different, like I can get just one group for a specific ID, or I could also create a group here. So that's what I like as well. I can just try these functions out without having them in my app already. So I could run this mutation, fill in the stuff in here, and then see how that function actually works. That's pretty cool. For our application, what we're gonna do now. So we're iterating through all the convex elements here. And instead of doing it like this, we're going to use a link component around it. And we're going to say href. And now we don't only have the path. I mean, we could have just like, what was it? Chat, and then the ID. But I don't really like that way. I want to be a bit more obvious how this works. So I'm going to say we have a path name here. So the path name in this case is chat/chat ID. And for that path name, we also have params. I don't know why I don't get code completion in the first place. And for the params, what we need to pass in is the chat ID for that page. And that's going to be the group_ID. So is the link component, why are you not happy? Probably because I didn't hit save before. Or chat ID under layout, everything should be fine. Let's see. Key is not assignable to type never. What is that? Who are you? How can you tell this? The key is group.id. By the way, we have to call toString, otherwise it's gonna complain. And yeah, I think this actually, no, they still won the final solution. String chat ID is not assigned. Did we import this right? Come on. We're in the groups, we're here. My group is definitely set at this point. I do have a path name. I was also confused that I did not get code completion for different objects in here, but it should be path name and params, and also chat ID should actually infer. Yeah, it should work just like this. Let me see what's wrong. All right, so it was just a simple typo from my side. It is lowercase path name, and I should actually be able to write to get into those pages. The ID is undefined that we get on that page. Yeah, that makes sense because it's actually not ID, it's chat ID. Okay, from the local search params, and yeah, then the log message is wrong as well. But let's see if I no-go to a page. Yeah, nice. Now we can go to a chat page and we get the ID already. Cool, so we have our routing in place. But the index file is of course not yet finished. So if I want to wrap some components with the Expo router link component, I'm going to put in as child, as that will put this wrapper component around our child, and we're going to replace this now with a touchable opacity. So we can click something, opacity from React Native, and that should certainly also get some styling. Let's call this one the group styling. Add the styles.group up here. And what this needs is the icon of the group, the name, and the description. So let's start with the icon. That's going to be, of course, an image. And we can set the source of that image using the URI of that image. So in my case, I just supplied, as you know, if you check the data, we know that the data here is just the URL. So HTTP Galaxy is something that should just work. So group, and again, if I don't hit a typo, we get nice code completion for the icon URL. And I'm gonna hit close here. We should also define a specific width. So let's set width to 50 and height to 50 as well. And we got the first two icons. Great. Next to the icons, we're gonna have the group name. I'm gonna wrap this in its own view because otherwise we have the column layout and everything would be below each other. So that also means for the group, I wanna set my flex direction certainly to row. And now that view should take up most of the space. So I'm going with flex 1, so it expands for the rest of the columns. So we will take up all this space, or like this space. And within here, we're just gonna add what we had before, group.name, and that should already show up nicely. Well, it's not perfect, but it's a starting point. And additionally, I will also add text for group.description. So now we got the description in the view. Let's probably add some styling in here. Let's set the color to 888, so it's like a little grayish. And now we just need to make that group look a bit better. That shouldn't be too hard. Let's see. We just need to add a bit of gap. So gap of 10. I really like to enable and disable Copilot on command, because for this kind of stuff, Copilot is actually pretty good. Like, it just knows that I want to say align items, center. I want to use a white background, so then it stands out a bit. I want to use more padding. Do we already have padding? No. Okay, great. I want to have a border radius of 10 as well. So really creating some really nice looking cards here. Margin bottom will be set to 10 as well. So now it looks like this. That's already a good start. And then let's do a little shadow. So shadow color will be just black. Elevation could also be set to 3 for inwrite. Then we have the shadow offset. Shadow offset width should be 0. So I just want to show this to like the bottom. And height is going to be 1. That's not adding it yet because we still need shadow opacity. Gonna use like some value. Okay. And then also using a shadow radius of 2.22. Just, yeah, I think that's a decent styling, right? For the beginning. And again, we can get into those pages. Now, the idea of our chat app is to not use user accounts. We're gonna do a little fakey here. We're just gonna create users. They should just give me a name, and then we're gonna use that for the messages. Because you can have authentication with Convex. However, they usually recommend you use something like a clerk or auth instead for having great authentication plugged into your application. And with the cloud function and stuff we've seen, it's really easy to add that to your application. So what we want to do is 2 things on this page more. Having this user dialog, so the user can just pick a name, and also creating a new chat. So we can actually call one of our mutations. Maybe we're gonna start with the mutation, so because that's cooler. So let's go to the create page. On this page, we need a bit of state. So what we need to do is we need to capture a name, description, and an icon. And yes, we could probably do this in a cooler way, but we're just gonna do it like this now. Okay, we also need the router because at some point we're done with this page and we can navigate back. So let's add use router. And let's also add our mutations. So just like before, we can add our mutation. We give it a name. Let's call this start group to start the group. And this will use the hook use mutation. And just like before, we're importing our API. Then we have the selection for the groups table. And then we have the 3 functions, which of course we want to use is create. Then I will add a function on create group here, which we're going to attach to a button, and inside of that function we will then call await start group, and this should now show that we need some arguments, right? And these arguments are description, icon, URL, and name. And again, if Copilot was here, it would definitely know what I wanted to do. Icon, URL. Okay. No value for oh yeah, we called it description. Sorry about that. I should probably just have called them in a different way. So for name, because it's the same shorthand, we can use it like this in the object. Otherwise, we don't have to apply it like this. Now, once this is done, we can also call router back to bring us a page back. So this is the page we're trying to implement. And what we do is basically we're just wrapping this now in a keyboard, avoiding view. There are other ways to do this, but this one worked pretty well for me in this case. This certainly needs some styling, so let's add const styles down here. with a style sheet, create. And in here, we are starting with the container as always, gonna wrap the whole page, has a nice background color and some padding. And we're gonna add this styles.container. Now, inside of this page, I just pretty much wanna have like the most easiest page possible. So we're always just gonna have a text and then a text input component. So we can just like capture some data in here. We just need some styling. So for my label, I just want to have some margin. So let's add styles.label. And then we have the actual text input, which has some text input styling that we're gonna add as a styling here. Dot text input. Also, we of course need to capture the change. So on change text, I will call set name, which will update my state. And also I'm going to set the value of this to the name. Now, I think, yeah, we do already have that input field. It just looks bad. So let's add some styling to the text input. I'm just going with a little border radius, some padding, height, and a background color, which just makes that field stand out a bit more. And I just want to copy that now 2 times. So 1, 2, second one will be description. And we just need to update the fields. So this is description and set description. And here we have icon URL, icon, and set icon. Okay, so we got the 3 fields. Now I just need a button to submit the fun. Touchable opacity. I think this is pretty obvious what we're going to do. So let me do this a bit faster. You can of course find all the code linked below this video. We're going to add 2 little stylings for the button and the button text. And with that in place, we're adding the actual touchable opacity to our view, which now calls the function on create group that we defined before. So nothing really fancy. Let's see, we have that function. We have 2 chats currently. Let's just call this test chat, and I'm not going to supply any icon URL right now. Let's just try and create, and voila. It's instantly there. We don't even need anything like state management in here because Convex, and by the way, we can use the alias here, because Convex has the real-time connection to our database, or is actually the database, like it's the reactor for our application. On top of that, that's pretty cool. Like, let's take a second. We can now create our own chat groups. That's cool. And they're instantly here. And I can also, of course, just like before, manage everything in my Convex dashboard. So data dev, am I wrong here? No, I'm right. So let's get rid of these. What's actually happening if I just edit something? Will this also update? Simon update. I assume it will. Yeah, of course it updates nicely. Good. Okay, we're clean again. And the only thing missing right now in here is how we create these users. Because before we start chatting and creating the chat view, which is quite the task for us, we should capture that user. So let's see. I'm just going to use a little state here. Let's start with the use effect. Let's start with a use effect hook. And we don't really need any dependencies. So it just runs once in the beginning. I'm gonna try and load my user with an async function. That also means I will just call it afterwards here. In that function, I will try and see if the user already has set a name. So I'm using async storage, and we need to import async storage now from React Native async storage. Async storage, and yes, there are better ways to do this, or there's like MMKV to do this a lot faster, but I don't want to do a dev build or anything right now. So using async storage serves a good purpose right now, and like, it's not mission critical anyway. We're doing a test here. So if I don't have a user yet, I should show something. And otherwise I will set my name. So let's do a little name, set name here, use state, and that's going to be empty. Okay, and then in that case, set name with the username. Okay, cool. So if I don't have a user, I want to use the React Native dialog to show a little dialog. And this is dependent on a state. So this can be visible or not visible. So set visible. And I will set this to false in the beginning because I don't want to like instantly open it and then I notice, oh, we actually have a user. I want to hide this. So let's better start it in this way. And I had some problems making this work instantly, so I'm adding a little timeout here to put my problems in the future. What I'm doing is I'm gonna say set visible true after a delay of like 100 milliseconds. That's usually already enough. So in my case, I don't have a user, visible will be set to true, and then we're gonna show the dialog, which could be just outside of the scroll view and could look like this. It will be visible when visible is set. Then we have a title and description, so that's coming from the React Native dialog. We have an input field which will set my name, and on press I will call a function to set my user, which we still need to define. So let's do this. Const set user. That's also going to be an async function. And within that async function, we are now setting the user. So I will just set the username to the name the user gave plus a random string. So just doing a little fake here again and saving this now to my local storage. So we don't really want to use any kind of user management in the app. I just want to have a way to see that, well, this user has a name and we can attach that name to a certain message. That just makes it work. Okay, set name with my username, and finally set visible false. Okay, thanks. So let's see. The problem is I probably have a name here. How can I remove all my data? Let's see. I want to clear everything. Would this work? I assume it won't, but let's give it a try. What's my username? Do we really like, yeah, the username is set to Simon G. That's a problem, but not a problem that we can't resolve. So let me comment this out and let's just for the second say async storage. Was it clear? Yeah, let's just clear this. And it should refresh. Okay, so now we don't have a user anymore. And we're gonna remove that and bring it in back. And at this point, I assume that if the app reloads, it comes up with username required. So you can't see this because my head is covering that. Here we go, username required. And I will call myself Simon G or Simon G, whatever. Setting my name and it will be set. So this little excursus was just a way of creating some fake user profile information. We won't really use this heavily, but if you're doing a chat, you have different users, they have different IDs, and so we gonna need this. Let's stop for a second and see. We got our Expo routing in place. We got the basics for Convex. We got the mutations, we got the queries, and we got the schema for the groups table. We can add groups, we can list them because of Realtime, and we can navigate into a chat page. So the next natural step is actually implementing our chat. But before we now truly build out our chat page and start the chatting, we need to get back into our Convex backend because we've so far only defined one table. So let's change this. In the first part, we took this right from Convex, but we can also do this our own just in here. So let's just do another table. I'm going to call this messages, and every message will have some content. It will have a group ID, which actually can or should reference the ID of our groups page. So we can have a relation here if we use v.id of the groups table. So with that, we have just created our relation between them. Then we have the user name, which is just a name right now. And we eventually will also have something like a file. And this one will be optional. So I can put in for validation that this is going to be optional. but if it exists, it will be a string. So later we're gonna tackle that file upload. This will be helpful as we now need to write another file here in our convex folder. So this is now for our messages. I'm going to call this messages TS, and we're gonna pretty much do the same thing like we had in here. Let me bring this over as a starting point to my messages function. We definitely need to query the messages, but this also means that we pass in something like a chat ID. And as we know, we are able to use Typescript, so this will be the ID of the groups page. Additionally, let's probably start by doing the mutation. So export const send message, that's going to be a bit easier, because sending a message is just about inserting the data or the right kind of data into our applications. So we got the handler, sorry. And we're gonna have an async function, an async arrow. No, I just want to do it myself. So an async function, we have the context, we have the arguments, and with that we are able to call context.database. What are you mad about? Yeah, this is not yet a fine. Context.database insert, and you see you could also have like patch, query, replace, whatever, but of course I just want to insert into the messages collection my arguments. Now the arguments are certainly not the arguments this collection expects, but those should look more like this. We should have the file, optional, the user, and the group ID, and the content. So that makes more sense. To query the data, we now need to do pretty much the same like we did before when we just wanted the information of one specific group. In this case, we will query and we're gonna check. Can we just probably take this for now? Let's see. Get. We're just gonna call this get because we never want to get all messages. They will always be specific to this. We have the chat ID, which references groups. Then we have our handler. We can, by the way, just extract the database from here if we want to. And then we have the chat ID destructured from the arguments. And then we don't need to use context all the time. We're gonna query the messages and we're gonna check the field group ID. And that group ID should be equal to the chat ID. And we're gonna collect all of the messages. I don't wanna limit this. I mean, we could put in a limit here, but for now, we're just gonna go with this. So boom, once again, we can now go back to Convex. See, the messages table does exist basically. Also, the messages functions do exist. So we got that in place as well. So let's head over to the chat page. On that chat page, what we need to do is we need to load the information for the group, so then we can put that in the header. We're gonna load the user information, and then we need to connect this to an actual chat view. Let's start by adding a use effect. Maybe the easiest use effect, let me quickly bring this in, is loading the user from async storage, just like we did before. And that also means we're gonna have user set user here, use state, and initially should be null. Okay, yeah, Typescript, this is going to be a string or null. Okay, now you're happy about that. So this is just loading our user, so we got that information. Now we also want to use use effect. And we want to load the group information using the chat ID that is passed with the Expo router to this page. Therefore, I'm going to put this in here. So we will run this when the chat ID changes, which hopefully only happens once when this page loads. Load group, async. And what we can do now is we can not only have our queries and mutations defined up here, but we can also run them one-off. So in this case, I want to have the group info, and I will call await convex. Interesting. Convex, please add the import. Use convex. Oh, there's also a use convex hook. I wasn't aware of that one. But I don't want to. Oh yeah, that's actually how it works, right? Yeah, I remember. So the way to use this is to actually use the use convex hook. Yeah. That was why it looked like very familiar to me. And now we can use this convex object directly to trigger our actions. So I want to query, and I want to use my API. Then the tables come up. So this time I want to get the information about a group. So I'm using groups.getGroup. And the second argument should be my information, my ID, right? And you're gonna see that now if I pass in just the chat ID here, it's going to complain because the TypeScript string is not assignable to type ID groups. So we have to create it like this. And we can do it, let's put this in the center, by casting this to as ID. This should usually come from our generated data model. Yes, exactly this one, ID groups. Okay, then I forgot, yeah, the angled brackets. Okay, so now it's happy. We just need a little casting of that like boring string to that ID type of the group. And with that, we have our group information. We can lock out that information if we want to. So let's see. If I now go in here, I'm not calling load group yet. I have to change that. Then I get back all the information. So here is my group information down here. We got the ID, we got the description, and of course we got the name. So I'll now just want to render that name. I'm going to remove that lock, and to render that name, we are going to access the underlying navigation. So navigation equals use navigation from Expo router, and that shows that we can just use React navigation because it's under Expo router, it's under the hood, and we can always fall back to that. And so we're using navigation set options in here to set my header. Let's see, what was wrong? Use navigation. You should be happy. Set options, header. Why is there a code completion? I mean, I'm pretty sure it is header title. Group info.name. Anyway, it worked. Galaxy's Pro Chat and Convex Dash. So I don't really want it to show up with test, so I'm going to change this. So it's just an empty string, and once we get the title, it appears up there. I think that makes a lot more sense. Cool, so those are the two basic blocks for our page. We're loading the group info, we're loading the user. Now we're gonna have functions. We're definitely gonna have a function like handle send message, which will do something. So we certainly need to add a message, and therefore we should probably have like a state up here. Const new message add set new message equals use state, and that's going to be an empty message in the beginning. And then we can also include our mutation once again. So we're gonna call this add message, and this is use mutation. We're going to use mutation API. From the API, I'm using that table, and I use send message. I really like this, like how this works, and with TypeScript all over the place, it feels good to me. I don't know why. And then we of course also need the use query to get the messages for this chat. This will be the basic stuff, API dot messages dot get. And this expects two arguments because we have now created this get function with an argument, but that's no problem. We can just pass it right in here. So that should be the chat ID. So thank you for the completion. And just like before, we're gonna cast the chat ID in here to satisfy TypeScript. And I'll also add a little fallback. So if there's nothing included, we're still gonna have an empty array of messages. Good, this is the basic stuff for our page. In fact, we can implement the handle send message already. So we can just say add message, pass in the object with all the required arguments. So the group ID is of course what we had before, our chat ID as ID group. Then we have the content of that new message, which should be our, what do I call this? I think new message, right? Yes, the new message. And then we have the user, which is our user, or or undefined. I mean, the user should be set, right? Let's say anon. It's just a fallback. Here we go. So handle send message is ready for us as well. Let's focus on creating the chat view next. Let's define our style down here. Style sheet, React Native create. As always, I'm going to have some sort of container, and I'm also taking the input container. So with a bit of shadow, offset, and elevation here, we will be able to style this. Additionally, let me bring in some more styling for this. So what we need is down at the bottom, and probably we're gonna change views now for this part. I think this makes sense, as I want to show you, and I don't want to cover that. At the bottom, we have the input with a text field, a send button, and the send color. Now, nothing of this is really fancy. This is just a super simple flex layout, and before we type 20 more properties and make the video longer than it needs to be, we're gonna do it like this. So let's construct our view now by using the save area view. So this will help us to not put any stuff where there's little notches here. I'm going to give it a style of flex1, so it spans over the whole view. And the background color, save area view from React Native. And we have the background color, which should be, let's use red to just show, yep, we're here, all good. All good, we're in the right place. As we insert some messages in a chat view, you usually want to wrap your stuff in a keyboard avoiding view again, because otherwise your view will come up with the keyboard in a real device, which doesn't always happen in the simulator, and you really want to avoid that. So I'm going to use the keyboard avoiding view, and what you usually put in for the, did we add the import? Yes. What you usually add for the keyboard avoiding view is a styling, so styles, come on, styles.container. And I also want to use a specific behavior. That's what you're always going to see. So the behavior here should be set depending on our platform. So platform OS is equal to iOS. If that's the case, then I want to use the behavior padding, and on Android, hate. That's what you're going to find in all the recommendations. Styles container, I think I might have messed up something. Yeah, that's style, of course, not styles. Okay, and once we got that input, we can probably fine tune our keyboard avoiding view, but I definitely want to put my stuff now in here to make sure that when it comes up, we're showing it correctly. Here will be dragons. So there will be dragons. This is our list of messages. And down here we have the bottom input. So this is, by the way, still to do if that wasn't clear. We're gonna start here now by wrapping this in a styles.input container. And if I hit save, we should already see that, yeah, we have this little shadow coming up there. But of course, we're gonna have to add some more things inside. Let's add another view component. Later on, we will also handle images in here. But for now, we're just gonna keep it easy. And we're just gonna focus on messages for the moment. So therefore, I'm going to set the flex direction here to row, so we can have the text input in here. Text input could be just something like this. Using our text input, value is new message, and on change text, we're gonna call set new message. I also want to use multi-line if that's possible. And the text input comes from React Native. So if I now go into a chat, it shows up here. Why is it showing up here? Because we still need to put in a flat list up here. So I could actually have developed it a tiny bit different. And then it will be automatically pushed to the bottom. Additionally, let's add two buttons. Let's see, we need some styling. We're gonna start with the first one to just send this message. So this touchable opacity, can we add all missing imports? Are you able to do this once? Yeah. This will just create a little button using our button styling and call the handle send message in case the message is not the empty string. And then we have just the icon inside. So technically I should be able to add something. Let's see, under messages, there's currently nothing. So let's test this. I have no idea. Yeah, nice. So this brought the content in here. We have the group ID because we defined this in our schema correctly as a reference. So check out the schema again. The group ID is a reference to the ID of a group. We got this connection here indicated, and we can just jump into that and see the group as well. So that's really nice made. We got the user, creation time, and ID automatically generated. So overall, our chat thing seems to work pretty well. Now we should also show the messages for a certain view. And as I said, I would like to use a flat list, and probably we can shift this again because I think usually you would prefer it here. Would you prefer it? Come on, let's just keep it here. Your eyes are getting used to this anyway. Let's do the flat list. So the flat list is, we could use a scroll view, you can use a flash list. There are different ways. In this case, it's not going to be super heavy, so I'm using a flat list. And the flat list usually has a function to render their cells. So I'm going to create it here. I'm going to call this render message. Will be list render item, and the item passed to this render function from the flat list will be a document of the messages collection. So this is not super easy, but it is going to be helpful. So then we can destructure and get the item in here. And we should see that this item has now all the fields of a message. So if we get the types right, this is pretty cool. Now in here, what I want to do is I want to check if it's the user sending the message or another user. You know, in the chat, you usually have like the right bubbles and the left bubbles, and they have different colors. So I want to check if this is the user message. And in my case, I'm just going to check if item user is equal to our user. So this is just a comparison by the name. Yes, in a real scenario, you would probably use the user ID, but it's not very far off from the reality. Now, we're gonna wrap this in a view. And inside of that view, we're gonna have a text element. Let's just do this real quickly and try to get the item dot, what is it included? The content, right? So if I send this, oh yeah, we're actually not rendering. So, well, we had my dragons before. We're now gonna put in the actual flat list from React Native. The flat list data will be, what is our data source? I think messages, right? Yeah. Will be messages, and the render function here for our flat list. So render item should be render message. I think we should also additionally define the key extractor to make everyone happy. So in this case, the key extractor item is item.id.toString to correctly convert the convex IDs into a string. Let's see. This looks pretty good so far. However, I'm not entirely sure why we got that save area at the top. I feel like we added the save area view. If I add oh no, what I do? If I just add the save area view from React Native, yeah, I think that works better in this case. Good, so we have messages. I should probably create another user. So with another user here from my device, I should now be able to use just the Expo Go app. So I'm opening up the same application. I think we're in the Convex chat. I'm saying I probably have the same name here from my device. However, yeah, it comes up nice. However, we should be able later to distinguish between the different messages, because that user should at least have a different ID. So we do have messages, that's good. I noticed something when we handle send message. What I want to do later is I also want to call set new message back to an empty string. So our view is taking up shape. Now we just need to render our message correctly. To render the message correctly, we're gonna need some more styling for this message container. So we're going back to the styling now, and let's bring in some more styles. Actually, let's see, so I can show you what's new. We have the message container, which will wrap one message at a time. So one message, it will use a max width of 80. That's important, because then we can have like a message showing up here. Okay, sorry. One message will show up here, and one message could be here, and then the max one could again be like this. So if we have a max width of 80, we're easily able to do this. The only thing we need to do in that case is we need to align message either to the flex end or the flex start. And by using max width, it will then automatically give us this nice effect. They have different background colors as well, and then we just have some styling for the text in those messages and making sure to wrap the text correctly, otherwise it sometimes looks really, really ugly. So let's try and apply this to our view now. Let's go back, because we have this nice render function here. I'm going ahead with style, and I'm now using an object and an array. So we can apply multiple styling. So I definitely want to apply the styles.message container first. That already gives us this effect. But then I want to check is this the user message? And if it's the user message, I want to apply the styles.message user message container, and otherwise styles.other message container. And that already gives us the familiar look that you're used to from most chats. So this could be a very long message. And I also want to test, and now let's see. If I press Command K, I can open up the actual keyboard, and we see that this is not correct. So in my keyboard avoiding view, I'm going to add something. I'm going to add keyboard vertical offset. I'm going to set this to, let's say, 100. Because right now I think that moves up the view a tiny bit. So with the keyboard vertical offset, you can make that happen. Let's see if I still open it. Yeah, that looks good. So if I now send that message, it appears up here. Also, when I send the message, I want to close the keyboard. I just noticed this again. So we can just call keyboard from React Native.dismiss. I found this is one of the easiest things to do in React Native, right? So let's bring up the keyboard, hit send, and then it would be closed. Cool. Now our message is not yet styled correctly. So I'm gonna add a little check in here already. So if we have content in my message, which we won't have if we have an image, in that case, I'm going to render this text element. It could probably mean, we're gonna just say end. Then I'm going to render that text element, and that text element will get a specific style. And again, just like before, we have the user message style and the other style. So let's copy this little logic we had here. If this is a user message, and we can have, first of all, in the array of styles, styles.message text, and then our check, and use either user message text additionally or other message. User message. I think we don't actually need something for the other message. Let's just put in null. So that looks already a lot better. By the way, if we go into a different chat, we won't see any data, because this is by the group ID and requesting only that data included only in here. What we can now finally show is also a little datetime component. So let's just put it under the styles.timestamp. And there is a time included, I think. So item.creation time. If I just print that out, it looks like this. So we're gonna have to see, we have to convert this somehow into a date object. Okay, this is not going to work. New date item creation time. Let's try dot to local time string. Yeah, why not? That looks good, right? That does look good. Let's also put in the user afterwards so we see who sent that. So item.user. And then we see time and Simon G something, and here is iPhone hashtag something. Nice. I really like this. From my device, test again. And we can just like, I can just have friends now. I can talk to myself and send messages around, and I can see them on my device in here as well. I really like this, and this is our chat, which works so far really better than expected. But this is of course not all that we want to do. So I will send something again and more. So now we don't really see the bottom of that list. Also, if I go into this, I would be up here and I'd rather be down here. So what you usually want to implement is some sort of automatic scrolling for your pages when you build a chat. Therefore, let's grab a ref to our list. You can use the hook useRef. It's going to be of the type flat list, as we're gonna make a flat list ref, and we're going to set this to null. Now, when we start our app and get our messages, I want to react to that. So I'm going to add another use effect block in here. And this time it will change depending on the messages. So once we get the messages, I want to add a little timeout. So the messages like can load accordingly, or if they're like images included, they can be displayed. And then I want to call listref.current.scroll to end. And I want to do this, please, in an animated way. That should hopefully look good. We're just going to add a little 300 millisecond timeout. So let's see if I now go into a chat. Did it? I actually didn't notice. Like, let's see. By the way, I feel like we should have some padding at the bottom of that list. If you want something like that, you can use inner view styling for the flat list, or what also works pretty well if you want to have something before or after the flat list is just adding a footer, list footer component. And in that component, you could have just like a view, or also if you want to have like a border, that also totally makes sense. Let's just put in a view with padding. And now you see I can scroll this probably even 10. So then we have this nice bottom gap there. Still, I wonder, it should bring me down. Not entirely sure. List ref. Oh yeah, we're not making use of the list ref. We need to attach that. So ref is list ref. Oh, how do we call this? Yeah, list ref. And now, yep, there it was. Boom, I'm here. And also I think for new messages, yep, because messages changes, and if one of the dependencies of useEffect changes, it runs again. So then we see that we scroll to the end again. Also, if somebody would send something from here, it would also automatically scroll my chat. Great, this is good news. Now, there's only one more thing left, or actually two, like one thing related to the chat and then one special convex thing. This is the rest of what we want to do. So the first thing is file upload. No chat without file upload. And of course, with convex, we can use file upload. This is somewhat still in beta as far as I've understood. And the way of using it is a bit different, feels a bit different than what we did before. Because we need to create a new, no, not a new folder, but a new file, http.ts. Before we do that, let me wrap up this view, so the UI part. And the UI part is at the bottom, where we just need a second button, a second touchable opacity in our input, which we'll call a capture image function. So const capture image async something. Okay, so at the bottom, we're now gonna have this button here as well. Additionally, we should keep track of a selected image. So we need a bit of state again. Selected image, set selected image, use state, and we can set that to null in the beginning, but it would be a string or null. Okay, great. Additionally, we might have an uploading state while we upload some files. So uploading, set uploading, and that state is definitely going to be false in the beginning. And then I think we pretty much got everything we need. So at the bottom, when I capture an image, I want to display it there. Therefore, we need the image picker. So there's one additional dependency that I forgot in the beginning. So here we go. Just npx expo install the expo image picker. And once we got that, you might have to add to your EAS JSON or to the, what's it called, app JSON, a little block. So after the Expo router under plugins, you might want to add a block for the Expo image picker and the actual permissions it needs. I'm not completely sure if we need this because with Expo Go everything is bundled, but better safe than sorry. So make sure you include that. Also, if you're using EAS builds, it totally makes sense. So now in my input container above the whole row layout, I'm just now going to render an image in case we have a selected image. So if we have a selected image, I'll just use the React Native image and set the source to Yuri selected image. And for the styling, of that component, let's just go with width and height of 200. That should be fine. So width, I feel like I'm not correct here. Let's see. 500, height 500, and some margin around it of 10. Okay, good. But we can't capture an image yet, so let's add that. But that part is done really, really fast. And I'm going to swap this out. I feel more comfortable with the other way because I'm scared that I'm actually covering some code with my head otherwise. So now we got this here. Where is the function that we added? Capture image. That's just making use of the Expo camera plugin. So use the image picker. Can Copilot fix this? Yeah, okay, well, yeah, that was actually not too bad. I mean, what it gave us was correct. It just didn't add it to the right place. So it should be up there. The import for the image picker. And then our image picker is launching the image library async. I will for now just use the images as I'm using the simulator, so I can't really capture an image, but that should be fine. And if the result was not canceled, I'm going to get the URI of that image by using result.assets and the index 0. So we're only capturing one image. Therefore, I'm sure I can just use this one and use the URI. And I'm setting this as my selected image. So pressing plus should now bring up the image picker. I'm going to select something and it shows up down here. Maybe this is a bit too much. Maybe this is a bit too width, height, probably 200. Yeah, I think that makes more sense. I think 200 is more reasonable. So now, once again, I'm covering this with my head, but no issue. The issue comes now in how do we actually upload this? The first thing is to check in the handle send message if we have a selected image. So if we have a selected image, we need special treatment. Otherwise, we can just stick to what we had before. But what do we do in here? As I've teased, we need this HTTP file now in which we can just create generic routes for our Convex backend. So far we've worked with the tables, we've written functions to access the tables, but we can also have just generic HTTP endpoints. So let's bring in an HTTP object here using HTTP router from Convex server. And we can now say http.route, defining our own route object. So the path to this route, I'm just going to call this send image. The method will be post. So I'm posting an image here. And then we have, just like before, a handler, which is an HTTP action object, which has the callback of an async context and the request information and doing something in here. Okay, that looks not too bad. We just need to return something at the end. So to make that function happy, we can just return new response JSON.stringify success true. Okay, we're doing it very optimistic in here, and I'm going ahead with export default HTTP. So this is the way how you could just set up anything you want with Convex. I'm not entirely sure if this now shows up anywhere. Yeah, post. Yeah, here it is. Post send image. I can't really test that function now. However, I could probably add another get route and return some data and just call the URL. So you can try that for yourself, but that should definitely work. Now, what do we need to do in this function? In this function, I will have to convert my request, first of all, to a blob. So from the request, I'm converting it to a blob object, and then I'm trying to store it and get a storage ID. This storage ID comes by simply using context and then storage. So not database like we did before, we can now access our storage from here. And there's only delete, generate, upload URL. That works in a different case. I think if you want to upload bigger files, you can generate upload URLs. In my case, I just want to directly integrate and store my blob file. So all of this happens on the Convex side, if that wasn't clear. So I'm not talking here about the React Native part. Now, additionally, I will now put this into my messages collection or database or table or whatever you want to call. And for that, I should extract all the user, group ID, and content information that might be present in that message anyway. And once I got this, I can now run the mutations for the messages table right from here. So I can say context, run mutation. And as you can see, you can also run a query or an action, but I want to run a mutation. I'm going to import my API object, just like we did before at Convex generated API. Actually, this should be underscore. Let's see. I think that import is not correct. I think the API should be from generated API. And then we should get from the messages the send message mutation. And that needs some data. So it needs content, which is our content. Then it needs the user and the group ID. And all of this complains because these parameters might be null. So yeah, I'm going with this. So I expect them to be set. In your case, please be careful. They might not be set. And the group ID is group ID. Oh yeah, that's usually for group ID. We need the group ID as ID of the type groups. Okay, can we just automatically add that import from the data model? Thank you. And now finally, there was one more thing. Content, user, okay, yeah, file. The most important part, and that is just going to be the storage ID, so nothing else. Then we return it, and we have our cloud function here that allows us to upload an image. Let's go back to my chat ID, and when we had many questions, it's now important to create, first of all, let's say I want to set my uploading state to true. So that should show a little overlay. Did we already add that? Probably not. So this is just a little trick I applied. Let's put this down into the view, probably after the keyboard avoiding view. Let's just use this view where we use the absolute fill right here on the style sheet. So that's a cool hack to just apply an overlay. And then within that view, I'm using an activity indicator, nothing fancy. I can also show you this right here. So if we say uploading initially is true, we see that we're in this state. But I'm going to change this back to false. So we're back here. But now, once we start the upload, we're doing it like this. And now the important part is to access the URL from our environment and include all the parameters. That would basically look like this. So let's please do this on multiple lines. We're using the Expo public convex site. And let me stress this. This is convex site. It took me about an hour to understand that this is not the URL where you can now reach the HTTP endpoint that I added. It is convex.site, okay? So I'm using convex site. I'm using the path to that function. And then I include the URI components, so user, group ID, and content. All of that is included in the URL. Probably not the best part, but maybe we could also extract this from the body, but I just wanted a way. It is actually unbelievable hard to correctly do like a blob upload with React Native and trying to debug all of this. So I was actually pretty pleased in how this turned out. With that, we can just make a fetch call now. So let's make a fetch call to the selected image. Then I can't use await. Oh yeah. Async. And by the way, I just want to check, did we add, oh no, we don't need to import. That's cool. No, I just want to get a blob representation of the image. So that's why I'm using fetch and then await response.blob. That's actually the easiest way to convert your Expo captured React Native image into a blob. And now we're making a fetch against the actual URL that we created to upload the image. And the object we need is, okay, here we go. Method is post. This is a post request. I also, by the way, tried the Expo file uploader plugin or the file system plugin, which has a file upload, but it didn't really work with this. So I went with this approach. And again, I was so happy once it finally worked. I was this close to giving in. Content type, I'm going to set to the type of the blob. So we're definitely gonna have a blob, so it will also have a type, and the body is just the blob information. Then I will get my data back. I'll just use it then, just for the good old times, for other people who don't like async await, feeling better. So at this point, I will call set selected image to null, because I don't want to display my image at the bottom anymore. And as well, I am calling set new message back to an empty string. And finally, we can or should have a little catch block. So in catch, you can just catch the error and like console log error. And most importantly, I will add a finally block. And in the finally block, we're making sure that we dismiss the uploading overlay. So this is the full function now, including my convex part. Whew, are you excited? I am, I certainly am. Let's see, I'm going to capture a random image. It shows up here. This is a cool image. I'm just going to put in some text and I'm hitting send. It sends, and I hope that this view is gone. Yeah, it is gone. It is gone. It's great. All good, Simon, all good. We should now find a new image under files. Yes, this is the storage ID. I can download that if you want to. So it will look like this. That's exactly the image. But more important is that under messages, this message now has this file attached here. Right, the ID. So how can we now display it? Because this is actually a pretty challenging task now. If we just go ahead and update our render message function where we had the item content, we could now just say, okay, if the item has a file, we just gonna render an image with the item file and some fixed size. However, you're gonna notice, as you can see, a file with that ID does not exist because, well, that's not going to happen. So what we need to do is we need to resolve that information, and we can do this on the fly in our message function where we query our messages collection. So After getting all the messages, I will now change this to const messages equals await. This gives us all the messages. And now I'm going with promise.all. So you could also use all settled if you prefer that. And I'm going to map through all the messages. It's going to be an async function, async message. And if that message has a file, I will directly try and resolve the URL by calling storage. And we don't really have storage yet. I think we can destructure it here from the context, yes. Storage.getURL by using message.file. And remember, message.file is just the ID to the file in Convex. And so if we do have a URL, I just want to make sure that I then return everything from the message plus as the file, the new URL, and otherwise I'm just going to return message. And we return promise all. What this changes is our whole query function from Convex now works differently. This also made this page here look red. I'm not entirely sure why. Because this is doc messages. Okay, we have made people very, very angry right now. Let's just refresh for a second. And let's see. Convex message undefined is not a valid convex. I'm not sure if this error is currently about the data of my flat list, which is apparently not correctly sticking to the doc messages I have defined up here. But let's go back to my schema. But we have a file which is a URL which is optional. That should be fine. And in here I'm mapping through all of these. So overall I feel pretty confident that this is the right setup. I'm not entirely sure. Let's try. We can debug this here. That's a cool thing. So we can go under functions and under the messages get. And if I run this, it should. Okay, good. Object is missing the required field chat ID. So somewhere along the line we lost the message chat ID. But where do we? Are we probably here in our cloud? We have the group ID. We have the group ID set as ID of groups. I feel like did we correctly have that data? If we do have, maybe we have messed up the group ID. No, we don't really have messed up the group ID. So it's something different. Let me check. Oh yeah, of course, I should probably put that return message out of here. So if we don't have a message file, we'll just return the original message. That makes more sense, and that should probably solve all the issues that our page previously had. So if I go back to the chat ID, the flat list is happy again. Let's try a reload here, my chats, and please image. Oh yes, there you are. Nice, it's so nice to see you. So here is the image. That means it's now correctly resolving the image. And again, we can check this. If we go to functions, if we go to messages, get messages, and run this, it should now run correctly. I don't think that this is correct anymore. So if it works on my end, why is it called by client? Validator, object, chat ID, groups. This is strange. Is it? Yeah, this is not the latest function. So maybe I messed up the Convex deployment here. I might be able to just hit refresh here. So then it will again just prepare my functions and check what changed and update all of this in our development environment. And I hope that at this point the messages, returns messages. So now I'm still wrong. What's your problem? I still wonder about this, but we've definitely seen that it works locally. And then I can also chat in a different view if I wanted to. So I could just put this in here, hit send, and then it should, after putting in a text, also upload this image to another chat. Nice. So all of this works. Again, storage is actually in beta, so be a bit aware about that. This is pretty much everything for the chat, but if you're interested in Convex, which I'm pretty sure you are after going through all of this, I just want to show you one more thing. And this @ sign is not what I want to show you, but I just want to do it for the convention here. So one more thing is I want to write my own custom cloud function, because sometimes you just want to execute stuff. And this is so unbelievable easy. So let's just add a new file here. I will call this greeting.ts. And inside I will export a const get greeting. And this is going to be an action. So we had queries, we had mutations, and now you're also seeing finally actions. These are like the 3 most important parts of Convex next to the reactor, which I still love. As an argument, we're going to put in a string, and the handler will simply return this in a fancy way. So the handler async function context extracting name from the arguments, and then returning welcome back, not Simon, but the name. Okay, so here we go. This is our get greeting function action. And let's see if we go to our index page. On that index page, I can now get this. Let's say const greeting, set greeting. That would be rendered somewhere below my list. Use state of an empty string. And that greeting, again, should just be somewhere down here. Let's just put a text in the scroll view, which shows the greeting in case it exists. And now, how do we load that greeting? Well, let's just do another use effect. Once we get the name, we will call this one. So here we go. We have the name as a dependency. That's better. And within, we're checking if we don't have a name, I will just return because we really need that name to call our greetings function. But then we can say const load greeting, and we can simply import that function. So that's what I really enjoyed all the time about Convex. You can say const greetings equals await, and we need to add it up here, perform greeting action, just like we did with use query and use mutation. We're now using use action API, and we see greeting.getGreeting. We go back, we call our perform getGreeting as the arguments. We know that we need to pass in a name, so we pass in the username. And once we get back the data, I will call setGreeting with that greeting from the user. Finally, load greeting before I forget about it and hit save, and boom, welcome back Simon something. So this is just the one more thing that I really enjoyed. Like, you have the flexibility of creating these, like the HTTP handler, which we had in here. You can also have like course headers enabled and stuff. Or you can just have your own cloud functions with use something, or even use from Convex the environment. So in your dashboard of Convex, you can actually configure environment variables, which would then be available here in your functions in a safe and secure way, because this stuff does not run in your React Native application. Although it is here in this folder, it is not part of your React Native application. You could have this somewhere else as well, but by having it here, we have this tight coupling of TypeScript between the schemas and the tables and the actual functions to make requests against the database, queries, to change it, mutations, or to run any arbitrary code using actions, which could be something like calling OpenAI API or Stripe API or anything else. So I hope you enjoyed this, and you can now just continue building this out and checking out more of Convex, or just enjoying chatting with yourself. Alright, and that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this introduction to Convex and how you can build a React Native chat application with the latest packages of Expo router and of course a lot of TypeScript. So I honestly highly enjoyed writing these functions. So how do I query my database? What is the schema? I can run them in the dashboard. It is connected with sync, and just how Convex worked was really cool and a refreshing thing to me. So go check it out, convex.dev. Again, thanks for sponsoring this video, and you can get started for free. Remember, it is still early days for Convex, so stuff like the storage was still in beta while I was testing this, so some things might change, but they have great quick start guides for React, Next.js, React Native that you can also check out. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more epic builds coming in the future, and I will hopefully catch you in the next one. So until then, happy coding, Simon.